You were found guilty of the abduction, rape and murder of Alesha MacPhail, a 6-year-old child.
In the serene landscape of the Isle of Bute, a tragedy unfolded that shook Scotland to its core. 6-year-old Alesha MacPhail's life was brutally taken in a crime so heinous it left a nation in shock. What followed was a relentless pursuit of justice, uncovering chilling details of betrayal and violence. This is the story of innocence lost, a community shattered, and the fight to ensure Alesha's voice is never forgotten.
On July 1, 2018, 6-year-old Alesha MacPhail was reported missing from her grandparents' home on the Isle of Bute, Scotland. Alesha, who was visiting for the summer holidays, had been sleeping soundly when she vanished in the early hours of the morning. Her grandfather awoke at 6 a.m. to find her bed empty, sparking immediate panic. Her family launched a frantic search, calling friends and neighbors to scour the small island. Within hours, the police were involved, intensifying efforts to find the missing child. The peaceful Isle of Bute, known for its tranquility, was rocked by fear. At 8:54 a.m. on July 2nd, the worst fears were confirmed. A passerby discovered Alesha's lifeless body in a wooded area near an abandoned hotel. The news sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community, which had never witnessed such horror. The medical examiner revealed chilling details. Alesha had suffered 117 injuries, indicative of a brutal and violent assault. The findings included evidence of suffocation, blunt force trauma, and sexual violence, horrifying even seasoned investigators. Authorities immediately treated the case as a murder investigation, urging anyone with information to come forward. Forensics teams combed the area for evidence, while detectives pieced together Alesha's final hours. Attention soon turned to Aaron Campbell, a 16-year-old local boy who lived near Alesha's grandparents' home. Campbell was known to Alesha's family, having occasionally purchased cannabis from her father, Robert MacPhail. His proximity and behavior raised suspicion. Campbell was arrested on July 4th, denying any involvement in the crime. Despite his calm demeanor during questioning, inconsistencies in his alibi and mounting evidence told a different story. Investigators began uncovering chilling details about the teenager. DNA evidence linked Campbell directly to the crime scene. Samples found on Alesha's body and clothing matched his profile, a critical breakthrough in the case. Surveillance footage also placed him near the scene on the night of her abduction. The arrest sent shockwaves through the island, with residents struggling to comprehend how such a heinous act could have been committed by one of their own. Alesha's family, reeling from grief, demanded justice for their beloved child. As the investigation continued, the prosecution prepared for a trial that promised to reveal the horrifying truth behind Alesha's murder. The search for answers and accountability became a rallying cry for the devastated community. The investigation into Alesha MacPhail's murder was methodical and relentless. Detectives worked tirelessly to establish a timeline, reviewing hours of CCTV footage and interviewing dozens of residents. The evidence pointed squarely at Aaron Campbell. Campbell's DNA was not only found on Alesha but also on items recovered from his home, including clothing matching witness descriptions. His digital footprint painted an even darker picture, with disturbing searches about violence and abduction. CCTV footage captured Campbell leaving his house in the early hours of July 2nd, walking toward Alesha's grandparents' home. Later footage showed him returning, carrying what appeared to be a bundle, believed to be Alesha's body. Campbell's behavior in the days following the murder raised additional suspicions. He posted nonchalant messages on social media and participated in community efforts to find Alesha, actions now seen as calculated attempts to deflect blame. The prosecution built a damning case, presenting evidence that Campbell had entered Alesha's grandparents' home, abducted her, and committed unspeakable acts of violence before leaving her in the wooded area. His motives remained chillingly unclear. During questioning, Campbell maintained his innocence, claiming he had nothing to do with the crime. However, his calm demeanor and lack of remorse unsettled investigators, who suspected he derived satisfaction from the attention. The community, once a haven of peace, was gripped by fear and anger. Vigils were held in Alesha's memory, and residents demanded answers about how someone so young could commit such a monstrous act. Alesha's family was devastated, grappling with both their loss and the horrifying details of the crime. Her mother, Georgina Loughran, and father, Robert MacPhail, faced the unbearable task of preparing for a trial that would expose every detail of their daughter's final hours. As the trial date approached, the case gained national and international attention. The peaceful Isle of Bute became synonymous with one of Scotland's most harrowing crimes, a stark contrast to its serene reputation. The prosecution sought to ensure that justice would be served, presenting a meticulous case against Campbell. The stage was set for a courtroom battle that would determine the teenager's fate and provide closure for Alesha's grieving family. Aaron Campbell's trial began in February 2019 at the High Court in Glasgow. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including DNA analysis, CCTV footage, and chilling testimony from forensic experts. The trial captivated the nation, with every detail scrutinized. Campbell initially pleaded not guilty, claiming he was being framed. However, his demeanor during the trial raised eyebrows. He showed no emotion as graphic details of Alesha's injuries were revealed, further fueling public outrage. The court heard harrowing testimony from forensic experts who detailed the extent of Alesha's injuries. The prosecution argued that Campbell had acted with premeditation, driven by a dark fascination with violence. Campbell's defense attempted to shift blame, suggesting others might have been involved. However, the DNA evidence was irrefutable, and Campbell's alibi crumbled under scrutiny. Witnesses described him as manipulative and calculating. In a chilling confession revealed during the trial, Campbell admitted to the crime but showed no remorse. He described the events in cold, detached detail, shocking even seasoned legal professionals. His lack of empathy became a focal point. On February 21, 2019, the jury found Aaron Campbell guilty of the abduction, rape, and murder of Alesha MacPhail. Judge Lord Matthews described the crime as wicked and cold-blooded, sentencing Campbell to life imprisonment with a minimum of 27 years. The verdict brought a measure of justice for Alesha's family but did little to ease their grief. Her mother described the sentence as inadequate, expressing disbelief that someone so young could commit such a horrific act. The case sparked national debates about the treatment of juvenile offenders and the psychological factors behind such crimes. Campbell's age and lack of remorse raised questions about rehabilitation and public safety. Alesha's family channeled their grief into advocacy, working to raise awareness about child protection and violence prevention. Her legacy became a symbol of resilience and a call to action for safeguarding vulnerable children. The Isle of Bute, once a peaceful retreat, was forever changed by Alesha's murder. Residents struggled to reconcile the island's serene image with the darkness of the crime that had unfolded there. Alesha MacPhail's tragic death remains one of Scotland's most heartbreaking cases. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, justice, and the enduring impact of loss. Through the efforts of her family and community, her memory lives on.
Today, we're diving into a case that really shook a peaceful island community, to its core.
Yeah.
The murder of 6-year-old Alesha MacPhail in Scotland back in 2018. And it's, obviously a tough topic.
Right.
But understanding what happened is crucial, not just, for Alesha's memory, but for what we can learn about, protecting others. We've got news reports, court transcripts, and some analyses from experts to sort of help us unpack this really, really complex and heartbreaking case.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating here and utterly heartbreaking is how the setting itself, amplifies the tragedy.
Right.
The Isle of Bute, it's known for its tranquility. It's almost idyllic, in its peacefulness.
Yeah.
So for such a brutal crime to occur there, it really just shattered that image, and left the community reeling.
Yeah, it's almost like a dark cloud descended on paradise.
Right.
So let's start at the beginning. You're on vacation with your grandparents on this beautiful island. It's summertime. What could go wrong?
Yeah. Right.
Sadly, that's exactly what Alesha's family thought.
Yeah.
Until the unthinkable happened.
Yes, so Alesha was visiting her grandparents on the Isle of Bute for the summer holidays. It was July 1st, 2018, early morning when her grandfather woke up to find her bed empty.
Oh, wow.
And from there, it spiraled into a nightmare.
I've read about cases, where entire communities come together in these situations, searching day and night. Was it like that on Bute?
Absolutely. You had family, friends, neighbors, even complete strangers all coming together desperately searching for Alesha. The entire island was mobilized. But as each hour passed, the hope, began to dwindle.
Right. And then 2 days later, the devastating news came.
Tragically, on July 2nd, Alesha's body was found. And the location added another layer of sorrow to the whole situation, really. It wasn't in some remote area. She was found near an abandoned hotel, not far from her grandparents' home. This place that was supposed to be a safe haven for Alesha became the scene of a horrific discovery.
It's hard to imagine a place that represents, peace and family being turned into a crime scene like that.
Right.
And then, of course, there were the details of what happened to Alesha. That must have been incredibly difficult for the investigators to process.
Yes.
Let alone her family.
It was a level of brutality that is difficult to comprehend. The medical examiner's report was incredibly detailed and revealed the extent of the violence inflicted upon Alesha. It was a truly grim picture.
Yeah, I can't imagine what Alesha's family went through hearing those details. Did the investigators have any initial leads or suspects in mind at this point?
Well, they had a community on edge.
Sure.
And a grieving family desperate for answers. The first steps, as you can imagine, involved meticulously combing through the crime scene for any trace of evidence,
right?
Any clue that could lead them to the perpetrator.
So forensics became the immediate priority. Were they looking at DNA, fingerprints, fiber?
Exactly.
All of that.
Every possible piece of evidence was collected and analyzed. At the same time, they started interviewing anyone who might have seen something, even something seemingly insignificant.
Right.
They reviewed hours of CCTV footage from various locations, hoping to find any movement, any person of interest that could help them piece together what happened to Alesha.
And amidst all this, a 16-year-old local boy named Aaron Campbell came under suspicion. What was it that drew their attention to him so quickly? Was it purely his proximity to the crime scene?
Proximity definitely played a role, but it went beyond that. There was also a pre-existing connection between Campbell and Alesha's family. It came to light that Campbell had on occasion bought cannabis from Alesha's father.
So there was a prior link, adding another layer of complexity to this already devastating story. It must have been a shock to the family to learn that someone they knew, someone who had been in their home, could be involved in such a horrifying act. Do the police have concrete evidence linking Campbell to the crime at this stage?
His alibi wasn't adding up, and his behavior was raising red flags for the investigators. But the real breakthrough came with the DNA evidence.
Okay.
It was a direct link that placed him right at the heart of the investigation.
Okay, here's where the science of forensics really takes center stage.
Right.
Tell me more about this DNA evidence and how it pointed to Campbell.
DNA analysis has become such a cornerstone of modern forensic investigations. You can imagine the meticulous process of collecting samples from Alesha's body and clothing.
Right.
When those samples were compared to Aaron Campbell's DNA profile, it was a match.
Wow.
And that match became a central piece of the prosecution's case against him.
DNA evidence is often seen as irrefutable in court. It's like connecting the dots directly from the suspect to the victim. But the investigation didn't stop there, did it?
No, they continued to build their case. Remember those hours of CCTV footage I mentioned?
Right.
Well, that proved to be another crucial piece of the puzzle. They found footage that placed Campbell near the scene on the night of Alesha's disappearance.
That must have been a huge breakthrough. Placing him at the scene, along with the DNA evidence, paints a pretty compelling picture. Was there anything else in the footage that stood out to investigators?
There's a chilling detail that emerged from the CCTV footage. It shows Campbell leaving his home and then returning later carrying what is believed to be Alesha's body. This visual evidence solidified their suspicions and added a deeply disturbing layer to the narrative.
So we have the DNA, we have him at the scene, and now we have this haunting image of him carrying what they believe is Alesha's body. I imagine at this point the community was in complete shock. What was the reaction like as this evidence came to light?
You can imagine the collective gasp of horror that went through the Isle of Bute. This quiet, peaceful island was now facing a reality that seemed impossible. One of their own, a teenager, was the prime suspect in this horrific crime. There were vigils, demands for answers, and a palpable sense of fear that replaced the peace they once knew.
It's like the innocence of the island was lost forever. What about Alesha's family? How are they coping with this unfolding nightmare?
The family was understandably devastated. They were grappling with the unimaginable loss of their daughter while simultaneously demanding justice. And amidst their grief, they were also trying to make sense of how something so horrific could have happened to their little girl.
It's an impossible situation to even fathom, losing a child and then having to process the details of such a brutal crime. Did the investigators uncover anything else about Aaron Campbell and his actions leading up to the murder?
Yes, remember I mentioned his digital footprint?
Right.
That turned out to be another critical piece of the puzzle.
What exactly did they find when they delved into his online activity?
The investigators discovered a series of disturbing internet searches. These weren't random or accidental. They were very specific searches related to violence, abduction, and even searches about Alesha herself.
Wow.
It started to paint a picture of premeditation and intent, a chilling glimpse into the mind of someone capable of such a heinous act.
So we have physical evidence connecting him to the crime scene.
Yeah.
And now we have this digital trail suggesting premeditation. That must have been a turning point in the investigation, adding another layer of gravity to the charges against him.
It absolutely solidified their case. But there was another aspect of his behavior that stood out, even more disturbing than his online activity. After the murder, Campbell wasn't trying to hide or disappear. He was active on social media, even participating in the search efforts for Alesha.
Wow, that's bone-chilling. Was he trying to insert himself into the narrative to throw off suspicion?
It appeared that way. It was almost like he was trying to manipulate the situation, to play a role in the unfolding drama. This behavior, coupled with the growing mountain of evidence against him, left everyone wondering what his defense strategy would be.
Right.
How could he possibly explain all of this away?
That's a question that everyone, including myself, is probably wondering right now. And that's where we'll pick up at part 2 of our deep dive. We'll explore the trial, the shocking revelations that came to light, and the impact this case had on the Isle of Bute and the wider community.
So the trial began in February 2019.
Right.
And you could feel the weight of the nation's gaze on that small courtroom.
Yeah.
It was a media spectacle packed with people desperate to understand how such a horrific crime could happen in their seemingly idyllic community.
I can only imagine the atmosphere, a mix of grief, anger, and this desperate need for answers.
Right.
The prosecution had built a seemingly ironclad case against Campbell. Did his defense team have any strong counter-arguments? Did they try to challenge the DNA evidence?
They did try.
Okay.
Their strategy involved suggesting that others might have been involved, attempting to poke holes in the prosecution's timeline and create reasonable doubt. But the evidence was overwhelming.
Right.
The DNA match, the CCTV footage placing Campbell near the scene, and his disturbing online searches all painted a very damning picture.
It sounds like they were grasping at straws, hoping to find anything that could shift the narrative.
Right.
What was Campbell's demeanor like throughout the trial? Did he maintain his innocence in the face of this mounting evidence?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
He pleaded not guilty, claiming he had been framed.
Okay.
But there was something about his demeanor,
Yeah.
his lack of emotion, that struck many as unsettling. Even when the prosecution presented the most graphic details of Alesha's injuries.
Right.
Campbell remained impassive, showing no remorse or empathy.
Some people might argue that a lack of outward emotion doesn't necessarily equate to guilt.
It's a valid point.
Yeah.
But the prosecution was very effective in highlighting that lack of emotion.
Right.
Contrasting it with the raw grief and anguish displayed by Alesha's family
Sure.
and members of the community.
Yeah.
They used it to build a narrative of a cold, calculating individual capable of unimaginable cruelty.
It must have been incredibly difficult for Alesha's family to sit through those proceedings.
Oh, absolutely.
Listening to the graphic details.
Yeah.
Reliving the horror
Yeah.
of what their little girl endured.
Yeah.
Did they ever address the court directly?
They did.
Okay.
Alesha's mother, Georgina Lochrein,
Right.
delivered a powerful victim impact statement.
Yeah.
It was a heart-wrenching account of their loss, their pain, and their struggle to comprehend how someone could inflict such suffering on an innocent child.
Wow.
Her words resonated throughout the courtroom, reminding everyone of the human cost of this tragedy.
It's hard to imagine the strength it must have taken for her to stand there and face the person accused of taking her daughter's life.
It's unimaginable.
Did Campbell react at all to her statement? Was there any visible shift in his demeanor?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
He remained impassive, detached, as if he were an observer rather than the accused.
Wow.
This lack of response further fueled the public's perception of him as remorseless and cold-hearted.
It's almost as if he was putting on a performance, further manipulating the situation.
Right.
So with the trial progressing, the evidence stacked against him, what was the turning point? Was there a moment where everything shifted dramatically?
There was.
Okay.
And it was a moment that stunned everyone in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Campbell confessed.
He confessed. After weeks of maintaining his innocence.
Mm.
What prompted this sudden change of heart?
It wasn't a confession of remorse or regret.
Okay.
It was cold, calculated, almost boastful.
Wow.
He recounted the events of that night in graphic detail, but without a shred of empathy. It was like he was relishing the attention,
Right.
taking pleasure in recounting his actions.
That's just chilling.
Yeah.
Did you offer any explanation for his actions? Any attempt to rationalize what he had done?
No,
Okay.
there was no attempt at justification or remorse.
Wow.
It was a chillingly detached account, devoid of any emotional depth or understanding of the gravity of his crimes.
Yeah.
This confession, in many ways, was more disturbing than his initial denials.
Right.
It solidified the public's perception of him as a callous and dangerous individual.
So with this unexpected confession, the trial takes a dramatic turn.
Right.
What happened next?
The trial had to proceed, but the confession certainly sealed Campbell's fate.
Right.
The jury deliberated,
Yeah.
but it didn't take them long to reach a verdict.
Uh-huh.
Guilty on all counts: abduction, rape, and murder.
A guilty verdict, a sense of justice served, but I imagine for Alesha's family, it could never truly bring closure.
No,
What was the sentence?
the judge, Lord Matthews, didn't mince words. He called the crime wicked and cold-blooded,
Wow.
sentencing Campbell to life imprisonment with a minimum of 27 years.
Okay.
He acknowledged the horrific nature of the crime and the profound impact it had on Alesha's family and the entire community.
27 years, a significant sentence, but still, as you said, no amount of time can truly erase the pain of such a loss.
No.
Did Alesha's family speak out after the sentencing?
Alesha's mother, Georgina, made a statement expressing her relief at the guilty verdict,
Okay.
but emphasizing that no sentence could ever bring back her daughter or erase the pain of what had happened.
Right.
She vowed to continue fighting for justice for Alesha and to work towards preventing other families from enduring such a horrific ordeal.
Turning their grief into action,
Right.
channeling their pain into a force for change.
Absolutely.
That takes immense courage and strength.
It does.
The trial is over. Justice, in a way, has been served.
Right.
But what about the aftermath? How did this case impact the community? And did it spark any wider conversations about child safety?
The impact was profound, extending far beyond the Isle of Bute.
Right.
This case wasn't just about a horrific crime.
Yeah.
It forced a national conversation about juvenile offenders, the psychology behind such violence, and how society can better protect its most vulnerable members.
It's like this case ripped away a sense of security, forcing people to confront a darker reality.
Right.
What were some of the specific changes or initiatives that came about as a result of Alesha's murder?
There was a renewed focus on child protection policies,
Okay.
with calls for stricter safeguarding measures in schools and communities. Organizations advocating for children's rights saw a surge in support.
Yeah.
And there was a greater emphasis on educating communities about the signs of abuse and neglect.
Right.
Alesha's family played a crucial role in this, turning their personal tragedy into a platform for change.
It's truly inspiring to see them using their platform to advocate for change,
It is.
trying to create something positive from such unimaginable loss. But amidst all this, there's still the lingering question. How could someone so young, seemingly without a motive, commit such a horrific act? What insights do experts offer on the psychology of a teenage boy capable of such violence?
That's a question that continues to haunt this case.
Yeah.
And it's a question that experts in psychology and criminal justice grapple with constantly.
Right.
There's no easy answer, no single explanation that can fully account for such behavior.
Right.
But there are certain factors that they consider when trying to understand cases like this.
Such as, what are some of the factors that might contribute to this kind of extreme violence in young people?
Things like early childhood trauma,
Yep.
exposure to violence within the home or community, mental health issues, and even brain development can play a role.
Right.
It's a complex web of influences, a combination of nature and nurture that shapes an individual's behavior.
So it's not a simple case of good versus evil, right?
No.
It's about understanding the interplay of various factors that can lead a young person down such a dark path.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there's rarely a single cause,
Right.
a single moment that defines a person's trajectory. And in Campbell's case, experts pointed to a combination of factors that may have contributed to his actions.
What were some of those factors? Were there warning signs that perhaps went unnoticed?
There were indications, yes.
Okay.
Reports of troubling behavior,
Uh-huh.
a history of cruelty to animals,
Right.
and potential psychopathic tendencies. These were red flags that, in hindsight, raised concerns.
It's easy to look back and connect the dots, but in the moment, these signs can be easily missed or misinterpreted.
They can.
Is there anything that can be done to improve our ability to identify these potential warning signs and intervene effectively?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's one that researchers and experts in various fields are constantly exploring.
Right.
It's about developing better screening tools,
Okay.
improving mental health services for young people,
Uh-huh.
and fostering a culture where these issues can be discussed openly without shame or stigma.
It's a complex challenge with no easy solutions.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge we must confront if we hope to prevent future tragedies.
Absolutely.
And that's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll explore the broader implications of this case, the ongoing debate surrounding juvenile offenders, and the efforts being made to prevent such horrific acts from happening again. So we've been examining this tragic case of Alesha MacPhail,
Right.
a case that forced us to confront some very difficult truths about violence, vulnerability, and the complexities of the justice system. And we've seen how this case, while specific to the Isle of Bute, really sparked a national conversation about juvenile offenders and how we, as a society, respond to such horrific acts.
It's a case that continues to raise questions, challenging our assumptions and forcing us to grapple with some uncomfortable realities.
Right?
Aaron Campbell's age at the time of the murder, just 16, made the crime even more difficult to comprehend.
Right.
It really shattered the perception that such brutality is something only adults are capable of.
Yeah, it makes you question everything you think you know about human nature, especially when it comes to young people. We often talk about rehabilitation and second chances, but how do those concepts apply when dealing with a crime of this magnitude? How do you balance the need for justice with the potential for rehabilitation in such extreme cases?
That's the heart of the debate, isn't it? It's a balancing act that the justice system constantly grapples with, especially when it comes to juvenile offenders.
Right.
There's this inherent belief that young people are more malleable, more capable of change than adults. But when faced with a crime as horrific as this, it's hard to reconcile that belief with the brutal reality of what happened.
It's like this case pushed the boundaries of that debate, forcing society to reevaluate its approach to juvenile justice. Did this case lead to any significant changes in legislation or policy regarding young offenders?
There were calls for tougher sentencing guidelines for treating young offenders who commit serious crimes as adults. But there were also counter-arguments, emphasizing the importance of rehabilitation. and the potential for young people to reform and reintegrate into society. So the debate is ongoing, with no easy answers.
It's a debate that goes beyond legal frameworks and delves into our understanding of human behavior,
Right.
morality, and the very concept of justice.
Yeah.
And we touched on the psychological factors that might contribute to such extreme violence in young people. Are there any specific insights that experts have gleaned from studying cases like this, specifically looking at the mind of someone like Aaron Campbell?
Experts caution against making generalizations
Sure.
or drawing definitive conclusions from individual cases. However, they do point to certain patterns, certain red flags that can indicate a potential for violence in young people.
What are some of those red flags that parents, educators, or even just community members should be aware of? What are the signs that might indicate a young person is struggling or heading down a dangerous path?
Early signs of aggression,
Okay.
cruelty towards animals, a fascination with violence, social isolation, and a history of trauma or abuse. These are some of the factors that experts consider. But it's important to remember that these are not predictive factors in isolation. But when clustered together, they warrant attention and intervention.
It sounds like it's about recognizing patterns, connecting the dots, and creating a safety net that can catch these young people before they fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
It's not about profiling or labeling,
Right.
but about being aware and proactive.
Precisely. It's about creating a culture of support, where young people feel safe to express their struggles, where mental health issues are addressed, and where early intervention is prioritized.
This deep dive has been emotionally challenging.
It has.
But it's also been incredibly insightful. You know, we've learned about the intricacies of the investigation, the complexities of the legal system, and the ongoing debate surrounding juvenile offenders. But most importantly, we've been reminded of the devastating impact of this crime on Alesha's family and the community.
It's a reminder
I'm
that
Thomas
behind the
Campbell.
headlines, behind the legal arguments, there are real people whose lives have been irrevocably altered. Alesha's case serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the importance of safeguarding their well-being.
And it's a testament to the strength and resilience of her family, who have channeled their grief into advocating for change, working to ensure that Alesha's legacy is one of hope and prevention.
Their dedication to honoring Alesha's memory by working to protect other children is truly inspiring.
It is.
It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there is the potential for positive change, for creating a world where children are safe, cherished, and given the opportunity to thrive.
It's a powerful message of hope amidst the darkness.
It is.
And, we can't bring Alesha back, but we can learn from this tragedy. We can support those working to protect children and strive to create a society where such horrific acts are unthinkable. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked some important conversations and inspired you to get involved in making a difference.